The tension inside the 60-minute studio was thick enough to slice through. The lighting crew adjusted their panels, the producer counted down in hushed tones, and Anderson Cooper gave his usual poised smile as cameras began to roll. Across from him sat Samuel L. Jackson, a living legend, a man whose presence filled a room even when he wasn't saying a word. Wearing a dark blue suit and his trademark beret, Jackson leaned back in his chair, exuding calm confidence. He had done hundreds of interviews before, but this one felt different. The conversation started on a high note. Anderson opened with warmth, praising Jackson's 5-decade-long career, his box office dominance, and his influence on generations of actors. Jackson smiled and nodded humbly, offering quick quips that had the crew chuckling off camera. They talked about his early days on stage, the grind of theater life, and his breakout role in Pulp Fiction. But as Anderson's tone shifted from admiration to analysis, the mood began to subtly change. "You've played some of the most intense, commanding characters in cinema," Anderson said, leaning forward. "Do you ever feel like that intensity follows you off-screen?" Jackson laughed, shaking his head. "People think I'm walking around yelling, 'Say what again?' all day," he said with a grin. "But nah, man, I'm chill. That intensity you see, that's work. I give it to the camera and leave it there." Anderson smiled politely, but he wasn't satisfied. "Still," he continued, "some people have suggested that your real-life persona mirrors those roles, fiery, direct, sometimes even intimidating. Do you think that reputation helps or hurts you?" Jackson's expression cooled, his tone lowered slightly. "I think that reputation comes from people who can't handle honesty," he replied. "I don't sugarcoat things. I don't have time to play polite when something's wrong." The studio grew still. Anderson nodded slowly, sensing the opening to push further. "When you speak out about Hollywood, politics, race, some critics say your words can be, well, divisive. Do you ever worry about that overshadowing your legacy?" There it was, the spark. Jackson's smile faded. He stared at Anderson for a long moment, his silence filling the room more than words ever could. "Divisive," he said finally. "That's a fancy word for uncomfortable. I speak truths that make some people squirm, that's all." Anderson adjusted in his seat, keeping his voice measured. "But don't you think there's a difference between being outspoken and being confrontational?" Jackson leaned forward now, his elbows on his knees. "Anderson, you ever notice how when a white actor speaks their mind, they're called bold, fearless, or authentic? But when I say something real, suddenly I'm confrontational." The room tensed. Anderson blinked, maintaining his composure. "I think people what?" Jackson cut in sharply. "People can't handle hearing the truth from me. I've been in this industry long enough to know how this works. They love me on screen, but when I speak as me, it's a problem." A few crew members exchanged uneasy glances. The air was electric, charged with something raw and unfiltered. Anderson took a breath, clearly trying to de-escalate. "Sam, I didn't mean." But Jackson wasn't letting go. "No, it's fine," he said, leaning back but keeping his gaze locked. "You asked the question, so let's be real about it. I've never apologized for speaking from experience. I've lived through things a lot of people can't even imagine. So if that makes me sound intense, so be it." Anderson's professionalism kept him grounded, but there was a flicker of discomfort in his eyes. He tried to pivot back to safer ground. "Let's talk about your latest film." Jackson interrupted again, his voice calm but cutting. "See, that's what always happens. The moment things get real, people try to change the subject." Now the atmosphere had shifted completely. The easy rhythm from the first 10 minutes was gone. Jackson's tone wasn't angry, it was firm, deliberate, the kind of energy that demands to be heard. "I didn't come here to play nice soundbites," Jackson continued. "I came here to talk about the craft, the struggle, the art. But if what you really want is to poke at me like I'm some kind of headline machine, you got the wrong guy." Anderson hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "Sam, I respect that," he said carefully. "But as a journalist, Jackson stood up. The movement was so sudden that it startled even the cameraman. He pulled off his mic, his tone final. "I've said what I needed to say. You've got your story." "Wait, Sam," Anderson began, but it was too late. Jackson straightened his jacket, gave a curt nod, and walked off set. The echo of his footsteps lingered as the studio doors swung shut behind him. The crew was frozen in silence. Anderson sat still for a few seconds, staring toward the empty chair across from him. Then he sighed, leaned back, and muttered under his breath, "Well, that just happened." Within minutes, the control room was buzzing. Producers whispered into headsets, debating whether to keep the footage or cut the walkout entirely. But everyone knew, this was going to air. And when it did, it would set the internet ablaze. By sunrise the next morning, the internet had turned into a battlefield. Clips of Samuel L. Jackson walking off 60 Minutes were everywhere, on TikTok, YouTube, and every major news outlet. The footage had already hit 10 million views before breakfast. Hashtags like hashtag Samuel L. Jackson walks off, hashtag Anderson vs. Jackson, and hashtag Unfiltered Sam trended simultaneously across platforms. The short clip, less than a minute long, captured everything: Jackson's cold stare, his measured words, and his silent, powerful exit. Fans immediately split into camps. Some praised Jackson for standing his ground and calling out what they saw as double standards in Hollywood. Others accused him of overreacting and being too sensitive for a seasoned professional. Twitter was a storm of opinions. One tweet read, "Samuel L. Jackson didn't walk off, he walked tall." Another said, "Anderson was just doing his job." Not every question is an attack. CBS issued a brief statement that afternoon, attempting to cool the fire. Last night's conversation between Samuel L. Jackson and Anderson Cooper was candid, intense, and unfiltered, it read. "We appreciate both men for their honesty and passion." But by then, the clip had already taken on a life of its own. News anchors replayed it on loop, body language experts were invited to analyze every gesture, and late-night comedians joked about Anderson trying to psychoanalyze the man who played Nick Fury. Anderson Cooper himself appeared calm publicly, though those close to him said he was shaken by how quickly things spiraled. That evening, on CBS This Morning, he addressed the controversy with his usual measured tone. "I have the utmost respect for Mr. Jackson," he said. "He's a powerful storyteller, both on-screen and off. My questions came from a place of admiration, not criticism. I regret that it ended the way it did." Meanwhile, Jackson stayed quiet. No statements, no interviews, no social media posts. Just silence. For a man as outspoken as he was, that silence spoke volumes. Fans began speculating that he was furious, while others suggested he was letting the frenzy burn itself out. Entertainment journalists hunted for a response, but his team declined every request. Days passed, and the intrigue only grew. Then, 5 days later, Jackson broke his silence, not through a network appearance, but through a casual Instagram live. He appeared relaxed, wearing a Lakers hoodie and sipping coffee, the faint hum of jazz playing in the background. "All right," he said, laughing softly, "I guess y'all want me to talk about that damn interview." Thousands of viewers flooded the stream instantly. He leaned back and continued, "Look, I ain't mad. I respect Anderson, always have, but I'm not here to play TV chess. When I feel something's off, I say it. Simple as that. I've been in this game for 50 years, and I've learned that if you don't control your narrative, someone else will." The comments exploded with support. "Tell it, Sam," one user wrote. Another said, "You didn't walk off, you walked away from nonsense." Jackson chuckled when he read that one aloud. "Exactly," he said, "I didn't storm off, I just exited the scene. Sometimes, that's the best line in a script." His calm explanation shifted the tone of the online conversation. Celebrities began weighing in, most of them siding with Jackson. Viola Davis tweeted, "Truth spoken with conviction will always make people uncomfortable." Jamie Foxx wrote, "That's why Sam's the realest in Hollywood." Even Denzel Washington reportedly told a reporter, "That's Sam. Straight shooter. Always has been." Behind the scenes, CBS executives scrambled to figure out how to manage the PR storm. Some wanted to air the full, unedited interview to show context. Others feared that would reignite the debate. Ultimately, the network decided to release a longer version online, a risky move that paid off. The full footage revealed that Anderson hadn't been aggressive, and Jackson hadn't shouted. It was, in truth, a nuanced and human exchange between two strong-minded men from very different worlds. After the extended clip aired, the tide shifted again. Viewers began to see the complexity of the moment. Some admitted they'd misjudged Jackson, others doubled down in their admiration. Think pieces appeared everywhere, with headlines like, "When Truth Meets Television, the Samuel L. Jackson Moment America Needed," and "Anderson Cooper and the Art of Pushing Too Far." A week later, Anderson reportedly sent Jackson a private message. Sources close to the show revealed the text, no hard feelings. I respect you more than ever. Jackson's response came just an hour later, short, to the point, and perfectly in character. All good, brother. The two men haven't spoken publicly about it since, but their teams confirmed there's no lingering bad blood. In fact, whispers began circulating that they might even reunite for a follow-up conversation, this time on Jackson's terms. In the end, the moment did more than spark controversy. It sparked conversation about authenticity, race, and how easily the truth can be distorted in the age of viral clips. And while others would have backtracked or apologized to smooth things over, Samuel L. Jackson did what he's always done, stood firm in who he was. Somewhere in Los Angeles, as the internet continued debating his every word, Jackson probably leaned back in his chair with a grin and said to himself, "That's show business, baby."